My name is William Descovich, and this recording is protected by copyright as of July 2018. I would like to tell you about the versatile straw pile. You rarely ever see them anymore as you drive through the countryside in Western Canada. But before the advent of the grain harvester combine, straw piles dotted the Canadian prairies. Almost every grain field had one, and they came in all kinds of shapes and sizes, but generally they looked like little miniature mountains, pale yellow in color, about 10 to 15 meters high. In those days, farmers used to cut their grain with a binder that bound the grain into sheaves or bundles that were laid in rows on the field and later manually stooked into stooks so that the grain would dry. And when the grain was ready to be thrashed, a number of farmers would get together and make up a threshing crew. The crew was made up of the thresh machine operator, who was usually also the owner of the thresh machine, and a grain handler, and 6 drivers. The drivers drove teams of horses hitched onto wagons mounted with hay racks, and they would drive around the field and pick up these bundles, throw them on the rack, and haul them to the thresh machine. When the load was loaded and it was hauled to the thresh machine, they took turns in unloading their loads by feeding the bundles one at a time into a thresh machine. Now, the thresh machine separated the chaff and the straw from the grain, and the grain was dumped into a grain wagon, a wagon box, and hauled to the yard by the grain handler to be put in a bin. And there was usually 2 or 3 wagons spotted up so that there would always be an empty wagon to be filled while the grain handler was away emptying a wagon. And the straw and the chaff were blown out of the machine with a great big fan and a big pipe. The pipe swiveled, and it was adjustable for height so that the threshing machine operator could build a proper stack. As a youth, I'll never forget the clean smell of freshly threshed straw. And straw piles had many uses on the farm. First and foremost, of course, they were storage for feed for the winter time for livestock, and after the snow covered the ground in the fall, the cattle and horses went to the straw piles to feed and bed themselves down. Spent most of the winter in the straw piles. Many a calf and a foal were born in the straw piles. And as the livestock fed, they made caves in the straw pile as they fed into it. And farmers had to be very careful to make sure that the caves aren't too deep so that straw pile wouldn't collapse and trap an animal and suffocate it. It wasn't unusual to see a sow build a nest in a straw pile and throw her litter there. And a few weeks later, you would see the sow coming to the yard on the livestock path with a string of piglets following her. Dogs also had their puppies in straw piles, and free-ranging hens, if the straw pile was close enough to the yard, the hens would make nests in a straw pile and lay their eggs there. And during the dirty 30s, the odd transient worker found the straw pile as a convenient place to spend the night when there was no other place to spend the night. So it had a lot of different uses. And one thing about threshing bundles was that the darkness comes early in the fall, and if the threshing crew wants to continue threshing into the late evening, they would sometimes light a fire to the straw so that it burned as it came out of the pipe and provided light for the crew. That's, of course, providing the straw wasn't required. But usually the straw was required for feed, as I mentioned, and for shelter, and for bedding. Anytime bedding was needed in the barns or the sheds, and the farmer would hook up a team to a hay rack and go out to a straw pile and get some bedding. Wheat straw was best for bedding, but it had little nutritional value, so the livestock preferred oats and barley straw. And as the grain harvesting combines came into use, the straw piles became obsolete and eventually disappeared. Nowadays the straw is baled either into square bales or round bales for easy mechanical handling. So the straw pile is no more, and that's the end of the story.